theory, in theory, I'm live. Turn the chat on so I can see everybody here. Alrighty. And then eventually people will roll in and I'll know for sure that we're live. I'm having a horrible histamine flare today. Right. Triangles. I just took a bunch of Chinese skullcap and we're going to have some tea and I'm going to let my brain off gas from this Q&A and it'll probably be better in a little bit. But yeah, I just done a flare today. Overdid it probably. Outside this morning. It's not a sunburn. I wish it was a sunburn. I could lie and say it was a sunburn, but it's like a very specific triangular sunburn. Hey, everybody rolling in. Glad everybody's showing up. You know what's really interesting is since I've started doing the Friday Q&As from my computer, it doesn't kick me into the like short feed algorithm like it used to, but in a good way. It really filters out a lot of trolls, and I think it notifies more people that follow me that I am live. So we're gonna get some tea going, and then we'll kick off this Q&A. And for those of you just rolling, I don't see that. That's a histamine flare, so my cheeks are real red. What's funny is sometimes to me on the camera, it looks like I'm a little girl that got a hold of her mom's blush and went, but it'll calm down. It'll calm down. Okay, so let's make some tea. I'm gonna do the Moonlight White today. I've really been stuck on the Moonlight White, the Silver Needle, and the Coulamon White. Those are kind of the three that I've been rolling through, but I haven't been drinking a whole lot of tea outside of the Q&As just because I'm trying not to push my body too hard. Even with a little bit of caffeine, I'm just, my system is in such a sensitive place right now. So, you know, it is what it is. Hey, everybody that continues to roll on in. I'm a little early today by like 10 minutes. We're all right. We're all right. So we're going to get this tea going and then see how things go. I have, I got most of the perennial stuff planted in the garden, which is, he almost was like, oh, now I need to turn the water on. That's how my brain's going right now. I got most of the stuff planted in the perennial garden, and I'm pretty proud of myself. I have, I had a lot of help from my husband, but like I dug all the little holes, and that's no small feat with our soil. And then we have like 2 mulberry trees to get in, and then all of our seasonal garden. Our tomatoes are not in the ground yet, which is insane because I'm in zone 5A, but they're in really big pots, so they're fine and continuing to grow. I think we're doing that tomorrow. And then that's that. It is what it is. You know, I have enough kale and collards to like feed the goats if I want. There's a lot of it out there. So I really like anybody who's like, oh, I wish that I could just grow like a reasonable like food source that could even like maybe grow in the winter and it doesn't take a lot of effort. Kale and collard greens is where it's at. I mean, you can grow cabbage and stuff too, but like, I don't know, kale and collards are just cut and come again, and you can get perennial like tree collards or tree kale that's really tall and never dies and survives the winter and can be there for a very long time. And so I don't know, it just, even when I feel like I fail, I'm like, I have a greenhouse full of this stuff, which is crazy because it gets really hot here in the summertime. But I plant them in the greenhouse because it gets really cold here in the wintertime. And if they're in there in the greenhouse and really well established, by the time winter hits, they keep growing, you know. And so my greenhouse is mainly for cold weather stuff, you know. But yeah, and as a reminder, like my lovely daughter Temperance said, I start answering questions. Once I've had my tea, sip of it. It'd be crazy if I just sat here and drank the whole pot. I'm like, okay, now we may answer questions. It just gives me time to settle in and for folks to roll in, you know. So I'm at the step where I'm pouring water over top of it. I do not know what set my histamines off today, but I can feel that my nose is plugging up. So if I sound kind of nasally, that's part of it. Again, I did take, anybody who has histamine or mast cell issues, I highly suggest making yourself a Chinese skullcap root tincture. It is just imperative. It really, really is. Knocks the levels back and all that type of stuff. So yeah, we're going to get those tomatoes in, and I think I'm just going to call it good. Oh, I'll have tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, and then I was going to plant more squash, but I'm just going to try to go with what I've got, and I'm going to grow them over an arch. My sunchokes are going gangbusters. I am considering switching over to just sunchokes and no potatoes, which I love potatoes. I do, but my soil is horrible. And because we have what they call Palus loam, which is actually a hybrid mix of silt and clay. So it's like the worst of both worlds potentially for soil. So like, even though we've been here for 5 years and I've been amending it with huge amounts of cow shit and alfalfa and everything you can imagine, like tractor loads. I have a tractor. I can't drive a stick, but I can drive a tractor. And it just doesn't matter. And so growing potatoes is really hard here. And then last year I went all in and tried to do a container method that I used to do. It's too hot here for container methods. Too hot here for container methods, in my opinion. I constantly watered them how I'm supposed to. I didn't let them dry out. I amended it heavily, and they just, halfway through the summer, they died back, but not like normal potatoes. They died back from the heat, and so it's too hot to not be in the ground. So sunchokes don't care. I mean, they're a lot like a potato, except for they have a lot of inulin in them. So your gut health better be on top of it, because if not, you're going to fart yourself to death when you eat them. But if you use them like a mashed potato where you boil them, boiling them removes a lot of the inulin, and I'm just trying to adapt to what will grow here. If I add sand to my soil, it will just make it more silt. It will just make it more concrete. Because when you add sand to clay, it makes it really strong, and that's kind of what silt is already, But yeah, somebody said wilted lettuce from Idaho going in today. Yeah. I mean, so I'm in Northeast Oregon, and a lot of people think of Oregon, they think of the western side where it's like temperate and kind of cool, and they don't really have super hot summers and there's lots of rain. No. Did you know that like 90% of Oregon is a desert? And I'm in Northeast Oregon, so I'm high mountain desert. So it's like super hot in the summertime and pretty damn cold in the wintertime. And so it's like it can hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit here easy, and then it can hit negative 30 Fahrenheit here. And so we have all of the worlds. Yeah, I don't know. I could grow the potatoes in containers that are sunk into the soil, but even my tractor has a hard time digging the soil, and I don't have a tiny tractor. If I had a backhoe. Like, I always dream, people like think about random shit, like, they're like, I wish I had this fancy car, and I'm like, I wish I had a backhoe. That would probably be a lot easier, but getting the containers out of the ground to re-amend the soil would fucking suck so bad. It would suck so bad. I oversteeped my tea thinking about potatoes. It's all right. We'll be just fine. My body's like, you're so hot and you're about to drink hot tea. I'm like, I know, but it'll calm you down. It'll calm me down. Like my histamine flares and everything. It's a delicate balance, because a shit ton of green tea can reduce like DAO enzymes in your gut, which is responsible for histamine clearance in a way, like through the SAMe pathway. But that's not really why I have histamine flares, so I'm not overly afraid of it, but it calms things down for me. Alrighty, that's a nice comment. Steph says, I've been enjoying your daughter's channel. She's very talented. I agree. I think she really is. And I think as she gets the hang of it and makes more and more videos, I think she'll just naturally grow. Okay, so question. If you have a question, say question, and I'll start dumping my brain out, and we'll see how this goes. Okay, so I dream of a bobcat for where I live. Yeah, I know. I'm like, backhoe. I've looked at those mini ones. I really have. They have like these really mini ones that could like fit in the back of our truck. And I'm like, maybe could it, like, but does a small backhoe just lead to like a backhoe addiction where I want like an even bigger one? Okay, here's a good question. What's good for toenail fungus and how to grow the nail back? Well, that's pretty bad fungus if you've already lost the nail, right? But I really like oak bark here. White oak bark. Jesus Christ, my brain isn't gonna let me talk today. Oak B-O-A-K, bark. B-A-R-K. She's full of really fantastic tannins, but also a lot of really antifungal microbial fighting capacity. So if you make yourself an infusion, like a nourishing herbal infusion, but you're not going to drink this, don't drink this, and then you soak your feet in that, that'll really start pushing back against the bacterial or the fungal growth. And then the next step would be to start, and this is going to sound funny, but start making your own homemade milk kefir and drinking it like crazy, but also soaking your feet in it. I know it sounds weird, but there's another lady that asked me about it. I told her, and she's like, it completely cleared up my foot fungus, because you're going to be attacking the bad fungus with good bacteria and yeast that go after it. And typically when a fungus takes a hold externally, it's because we don't have enough good bacteria to fight it off. And then once it happens, your nail will just naturally start to regrow. Make sure that you're getting enough like protein and collagen-rich bone broth and things like that, vitamin C, vitamin K, calcium. Nails are bones in a way, right? So the same thing that helps you have strong bones will help you regrow and have strong nails. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. These are going fast. Question: would teasel help feet nerve pain? And is it just the root, or can I use leaves also for a tincture? I don't really think of teasel as a nerve pain relief herb. She is more about chasing bacteria, like people like to use her for limes and stuff. And so while she might be indicated to an extent, I feel like you might end up making yourself feel gross doing that. You would want to use the roots dug up in fall is typically when you would use teasel root for anything. But when it comes to like nerve pain in your feet, have you had your B12 levels checked? Have you had your thiamine levels checked? Have you had your magnesium levels checked? A lot of these nerve pains can be from that. Now, it could be, from diabetes. It could be from chemotherapy. You could know the underlying cause. But if this has just started and you don't know the exact why, it's something to consider looking into. And then topically for nerve pain, I really like a good cayenne salve, or even interchanging that with, like, you could make a St. John's wort infused oil and then add cayenne to that. And that would probably be pretty effective topically, but definitely start looking for that root cause if you haven't. Okay. That's an interesting question. Question. I have a friend that is losing blood somewhere, but all the tests are showing nothing. What would you think it could be? I just find it interesting. I assume they check their stomach already for an ulcer, their intestines for an ulcer, if they've got a bleed somewhere, and then they know that it's for sure a bleed. I don't know, you could start just like fortifying the body to like help it heal that up. Like, are they getting enough vitamin K1 and K2? So there's this thing that can happen when you have a severe K1 and K2 deficiency where it kind of makes you like a hemophiliac, and so like you kind of can just leak blood. Oh fuck, it creeps me out. Not necessarily out of your skin, but in your body. So like, I hope to God they've tested for vitamin K1 and K2 deficiency already. That would be a good option to help your body start clotting and no longer bleeding. Right, and then if it is the stomach, but I feel like they've probably ruled that out because that's usually the place that starts. You could start working with things like mallow infusion, slippery elm, if it's right in the stomach, right? But also consider talking to them about eating liver on a consistent basis to help replace what they're losing. You need heme iron, and heme iron only comes from animals, from blood, hemoglobin. That's what it's from. I don't know if that was a human or a cat. I think it was a cat. And so that's something to consider looking into. But if they haven't had their K1 and K2 levels checked, I really hope that they get that done pretty soon. I already had shown that one. Okay. Let's see. Scrolling through here. Here's a question. What would help clear up the beginning of an upper respiratory infection? It really depends if it's bacterial or viral. So usually what happens is you have something viral and then it sets into a bacterial infection. They kind of go along, like kind of how you can get a really bad cold, which is a virus, but then it turns into a sinus infection, which is bacterial. But I really like mullein for this, thyme, but also like yarrow tincture would be fantastic. But thyme is probably super accessible to you right now. I mean, most people can go to the grocery store and buy thyme, THYME, not like physical time, like I'm running out of time. And you could simmer that up like a broth, basically, and you could add onions and honey to that, and it would really help break things up. And that is just a pretty good option. Okay, here's a question. Question: what are your thoughts on DMSO topical and internally? I know a lot of people want it to be a miracle drug, but the thing you need to understand that it's a really powerful sulfur-based compound. And if you don't have good like sulfur pathways, it can really damage you, right? And I think that people go too hard and too fast on it, and they don't understand that if it's not super pure, or if you're mixing it with things that aren't supposed to go into your blood, you can harm your liver, you can harm all of your other organs and things like that, because DMSO is so powerful that once you put it on your skin, it enters your bloodstream and it rushes throughout your body. I'm not saying there aren't applications. I think that it's dangerous when we look at something that's man-made and that is a powerful chemical as a panacea to health, right? And so I had a person, with kindness in their heart say, oh, I think DMSO would really help you with like your genetic mutations and things. I'm like, well, actually it would fucking kill me, because I have a lot of like sulfur processing mutation issues, meaning like I don't really do well if I eat a lot of onions or garlic or I do okay with like kale and stuff that has sulfur in it, but if it's like really high up there, I can get backlogged and get really sick. So if I took DMSO, it would fuck me up. It would make me really, really sick. Because basically it's a sulfur. And so I think that it has applications, but I don't think that we should just add it as willy-nilly. And I think that we should start researching what's happening in our body specifically that we think that it will help us with. But then you need to really understand those pathways before you start messing around with something like DMSO, because it's not benign. It's not like you've made like an herbal infused salve, and not to say that those are always benign by any means, but it's not like it doesn't penetrate and go directly to your liver, right? And so it's just something that I think that people should research more based on their individual body before they start messing with it. Okay, let's see. Here's a question. Also, there's a lot of questions here. I'm just digging through for stuff that I find interesting, so I don't respond to the same questions over and over again on every Friday Q&A. Question: what's good for hair loss after radiation? Well, topically, you could start working with a combination of castor oil and emu oil together. Castor oil is pretty good for hair growth, but it's really easy to go overboard with it and then like smother your follicles because it doesn't get a lot of air through. But when you combine it with emu oil, which also really stimulates hair growth, that is a great option. You could also start working with like a rosemary infused water. Use real rosemary, not essential oils here. A rosemary infused water on your scalp, right, to start stimulating those follicles. And so really it's all about just kind of getting them to wake back up, right? And then of course, like deep nutrition all around, because radiation is knocking all the nutrients out of your body, and you're going to really want to focus on like gelatin, animal-based proteins, healthy fats, things like that. Okay, this is a complex question, but let's see if we can do it safely. So, and it's a long one, so I can't read it on the screen. Question: what is safe to take with blood pressure meds to naturally lower blood pressure to get off the pharmaceuticals? I am taking 8 milligrams of paradopril. So, no matter what it is, if you're taking a same versus same, right? So this is kind of the way it works with pharmaceuticals. You want to know what is or isn't safe to take with the medication. You need to see if it has the same actions, right? Like if you're on a blood pressure medication and you use blood pressure lowering herbs, it can lower your blood pressure too low. But I understand the desire to try to wean off of the medication and just use herbs. But you're going to have to really keep an eye on your body and watch your levels, because they do the same thing, right? So if you do decide to do this, my top pick personally for lowering blood pressure is hibiscus. They have shown actually in clinical trials that just 2 cups of hibiscus tea for 10 days lowered blood pressure between 10 to 20 points consistently, right? And so if you can talk with your doctor, depending on how dangerously high your blood pressure was, you could theoretically decide to make yourself a plan where you start weaning onto hibiscus and off of your medication, right? So instead of just being like, bam, I go off and I start taking this, or taking it all at once at the same time, you could start taking less and less of your blood pressure medication while you drink more and more of the hibiscus tea. Does that make sense? So you're trying to like level out the field and stretch it out in a different way instead of just slamming them together or stopping altogether. And so that is what I would consider researching. Okay. Hi, April. After straining rose hips, is there anything I can do other than dump them? Well, I mean, I guess you could eat them, I guess, if they didn't have their seeds in them. You might be able to like smash it up and use it for like a jam or something like that. Usually I just compost them, throw them to the chickens, throw them out in the yard or whatever. My yard is a pasture. So it's not just a normal yard, put them around bushes, things like that. But you will have gotten most of the medicinal properties out of them when you boil them, so there's not a whole lot left there, and that's the point, is to transfer what's in them into the water. But there's nothing wrong with like attempting to eat them. Now with a tincture, sometimes what you can do is take the tincture and then keep it in your freezer, like not the tincture itself, but like whatever, like if you made a rosehip tincture, and then you could use those to make tea, and they call that tincture tea. But it doesn't really apply here because you're already using them as a tea. Okay. All right. So let's see this one. Question. What could help with nail pitting? Labs are fine, just low on vitamin D. Raised vegetarian. Neuropathy suggested naturopath suggested hemp seeds, but no difference yet. Any suggestions? What labs did you get done? Did you have your thiamine looked at? I mean, with nail pitting, there's usually an underlying nutrient deficiency, and depends on what labs they might have missed. I would really be interested in your thiamine levels. And doctors, even naturopaths, almost never suggest thiamine. But being raised vegetarian, it's probably something in the B vitamin range. Could get your heme iron levels checked. Also, I assume they checked your kidney and your liver function, because sometimes with your nails actually say a lot about what's going on, like with your liver and things like that. But yeah, I would just kind of like look at labs again. I would look at what labs they did and what labs they didn't do via your own research of like looking into what deficiencies can be, causing nail pitting. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. Question. Can I make a simple tincture from chaga? All the info I've seen talks about double extraction, but was wondering if I can just do 80 to 100 proof vodka tincture. Yes, with a twist. So the reason they talk about making a double extraction, which isn't as overwhelming as it sounds, but the reason they do that is because the PSK and the PSP, which is like the polysaccharide compounds, they're only water soluble when heat's applied. And so you really need that hot water to pull out a lot of the benefits that are in those mushrooms, right? But I've got a cool trick for you. Use 100 proof vodka. That way it's 50% water, 50% alcohol. Piece of tea in my mouth. And then what I want you to do is get yourself a seed heating mat if you haven't got one already for like herbal infused oils and stuff. You are going to make like a little hot box where you put that seed heating mat inside of like a Tupperware box so it holds heat, right? You're going to put your tincture in there. You're going to let it sit there for like 8 to 12 plus weeks while it's hot. So what happens is, the water content in the vodka gets hot enough to extract the PSK levels. So you don't have to make a double extraction. It's what I started doing back in the day for the apothecary when I was making 3, 6, 8 gallon batches of tincture, which made it pretty hard to do the double extraction method. And so I got curious. I did a small batch. I sent it in for lab testing, and the PSK levels were fine after that. It just has to be hot water plus time. Right. It doesn't get as hot as when you're boiling it, obviously, but the time seems to make up for it. And usually when you make a hot box like that with a seed heating mat, it usually is consistently around 100 degrees in there. Okay. So, question, is teasel root harvested in the second year? I am growing it, and a root is so small in the first year, but second year it dies. Yeah, you'll find debate about this online. Usually what you'll want to do, if you are going to dig it the first year, you dig extra. It will be more potent the first year because that root is attempting to live, if that makes sense. It's storing up all of its sugar and nutrients live through the winter so it can bloom again the next year. The next year, what you want to do if you're going to use the root, and it will be a bigger harvest, is you don't want to wait till fall. You also don't want to wait till spring. You want to do it about midway through, just before she blooms. That way the root has time to basically restore itself after starving all winter, because it's like a root cellar for the plant, right? And so basically, if you harvest in spring of a second year, the root will be pretty much empty. But if you wait until fall, the plant will have given all of her energy to the bloom and making seeds. So if you do it just before she blooms, that root is primed because she has, amped herself up to support the blooming and the rooting. But either is fine. You just kind of want to time it different. Okay. So, question. Other than, besides milk thistle, what else can you use for your pancreas and bile duct? Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of milk thistle. Don't get me wrong. I think she has her time and her place, but she tends to push things too hard. And the simplest answer is roasted dandelion root tea. She's fantastic for pancreas, liver, gallbladder, all of that type of stuff. Also, check out the role of phytic acid on the liver, pancreas, gallbladder, all of that. It's really, really interesting stuff. They believe that, like with gallbladder, a lot of it's like calcium deposit buildup and things like that. And that blocks your bile duct. And I know you're asking about pancreas, but that whole area is so deeply interconnected. And phytic acid is really amazing at helping our body regulate calcium levels and to prevent that buildup. It's also why she's pretty good at getting rid of and preventing kidney stones as well. And it's just amazing. And it's really been demonized as an anti-nutrient, but like it has been in the human diet for all of existence. And then in the 60s, we went crazy and started saying that it was an anti-nutrient and stripped it out of everything. And now we have huge issues. And so, again, I've talked about this multiple times. I just need to make the video. I made a video specifically about phytic acid, but it's something that I would look into. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so here's one. Question. Hi, April. You've recommended in the past video an alternative medicine in place of aspirin, ibuprofen, etc. for headaches. Can you recommend the name? So I like aspirin, and I won't lump it in as the same as ibuprofen. Aspirin is a good option. Just make sure you're on top of your B12 and your vitamin K levels if you're using her, because she does have thinning effects, and we do know that with chronic use that she can lower B12 somewhat. But it really depends on what's causing the headache. Headaches are so complex. It could be that you have blood pressure issues. It could be that you have a magnesium deficiency. It could be that you need to have your neck worked on, that it's really stiff and you have like nerve ending issues. It could be a thiamine deficiency. It could be a B12 deficiency. It could be stress. It could be under eating. It could be, I could keep going. There's a lot of, it could be estrogen dominance. It could be not enough progesterone. It could be too much testosterone. Like headaches are really, really hard to nail down. But if it's, when it comes to like tension and stuff, like California poppy might be a good option. If it's hormone related, pine pollen could be an option, or wild yam could be an option. If you're looking for another medication, LDN, low dose naltrexone, has helped people because it turns out sometimes headaches are from immune dysfunction. It could be that you're not getting enough electrolytes, and so it's probably overwhelming. But if you sat down and you really did your research on all the things that can cause a headache, and you wrote it all out, you printed it all out, and you went through one by one and checked off everything in that list, that you've checked it, that you've considered it, that you've looked into it, that you've tried it, eventually you'll get to one on the list that is your answer, right? And I know people want like an instant thing, right? But if aspirin helps, I do kind of wonder if it's a blood flow issue. I've talked about probably rosemary and lion's mane for that. Sometimes when our neck gets really congested, like if you've ever had a neck injury, whiplash, anything like that, or if you have neck pain on a consistent basis, or your posture's fucked up, or anything like that, it's highly possible that your neck is just really jammed up, and then that's preventing a lot of blood flow from getting through your primary nerves into your brain, and that is a huge cause for like headaches. It is a relatively common one, and so you could also look into like myofascial release massage of your neck, and opening those muscles up. If you haven't tried any of that already, you probably have. Most people when they're desperate have, but if you haven't, it's definitely something to look into. Okay, so let's see. Question. I was told my uterus lining is thick after a colonoscopy, postmenopausal. After some bleeding, spotting, abnormal pap. I was told I would need a DNC next. What would you do? Well, I would consider looking into getting your own private hormone test done. I like the Everywell kit for women. It's a little expensive, and insurance doesn't typically pay for it. But you'll be looking at your testosterone levels, you'll be looking at your progesterone levels, you'll be looking at your estrogen levels, and then your thyroid, as well as usually your FHA, all that type of stuff, and cortisol. Because usually I'm looking at hormones here, right? I'm looking at hormones. I'm looking at why has this started happening? Are you currently estrogen dominant? I know that sounds crazy. People were like, well, I've gone through menopause, but phytoestrogen, and hormone disruptors are in like everything in humanity right now. And so it used to be when women went through menopause, they had really low estrogen levels, but the problem is it builds up in fatty tissue. So like even if you are no longer necessarily producing a whole lot of estrogen, you can be eating it in, and you can have a buildup from a lifetime of exposure to phytoestrogens. And so I really like getting that looked at, because if you're still estrogen dominant, and the thing to know about estrogen dominance, your estrogen doesn't have to be through the roof. It doesn't have to be like insanely high. It just has to be insanely high in comparison to your progesterone and your testosterone. So if these levels have dropped significantly while this has still remained elevated, even if it's in the normal range, if it's really out of range compared to the other ones, it can cause things like uterine thickening. And so I'm not saying to not listen to your doctor or not get the DNC, but look for the root cause of it, because you could get a DNC and then end up having the same thing happen, and then you're in this chronic cycle of, and it's really hard on your body to get that. And so you could talk to your doctor about doing these lab tests, but most of them are really incompetent. Just like said the quiet part out loud when it comes to testing progesterone and testosterone levels in women, because they just think about estrogen. And then after that, you could fall down the rabbit hole of like the direct work of Dr. Raymond P. in regards to dealing with estrogen dominance, and that would probably bring you a lot of relief. Here's one question. What resources do you suggest learning about herbalism for livestock? I get this question relatively often. There are quite a few books out there about it, but I would say look for the older books. Look for books in general about treating animals holistically that were written before the 1990s, because everything after that is fucking essential oils. And that's a really good way to hurt your livestock, hurt yourself in general, but most animals don't have the capacity to process phenols, and you can really harm them that way. But one thing that I have learned over the years is that, and I know this isn't capable and available to everybody. I've had goats for a long time, cattle, pigs, chickens. If they have access to a well-diversified pasture and browsing where all kinds of herbs come up, I don't really have issues with my livestock. I don't have to really worm them. They never have ticks. I don't really ever deal with mastitis. I don't really have any of those issues because they're out there choosing if they're going to be eating feverfew or going to be eating this or that. And the thing is, people make the mistake of trying to eradicate all of the invasive weeds out of their pasture. And I get it if it's something like oleander or something that will like kill your livestock like dead. But most of the time, these invasive weeds have a really high medicinal profile for the livestock, but a lot of topical stuff I'll also use, like, I use yarrow a lot. Witch hazel is really underrated, and then infuse that witch hazel with yarrow, if they get a wound or something like that. Pine tar is fantastic, especially if you have a high fly load and you need to keep the flies from like laying on them, especially if we've got the screw worm coming up, which is horrendous. But you really want to do something to stop flies from laying eggs in those wounds, and pine tar is fantastic for that. But generally I would just look for any holistic animal care book that was before the 90s. And there are quite a few herbalists out there that are like very specific about working with livestock and herbs and stuff like that. But usually I just kind of wing it, and most of the time they're very healthy on their own, just based on the fact that they have access to all this stuff. Okay, so all right, here we go. Question: how can my mom grow some of her eyebrows back? She's putting castor oil on them constantly, but hairs are growing in spots other than the bald spots. LOL, thanks so much. Yeah, so has she had her thyroid checked? A really big symptom of like an unhappy thyroid is you start losing your eyebrows, and they start thinning, and they usually start from here and then they go all the way up. So making sure that she's gets her thyroid levels checked, but like also getting enough of like bioavailable iodine from like seaweed infusions and things like that would be a really powerful way. She could switch over to emu oil instead of castor oil. If castor oil isn't working for her, she could apply rosemary topically. But I would really look into what's happening with her thyroid and nutrients in general, because when we start losing hair, unless you have alopecia, it's typically, especially in women, it's typically linked to like really low thyroid or adrenal function, on top of like just a body completely being, malnourished. Okay, question: what would you use for fibromyalgia? It's a complex question because I think that they name a lot of stuff fibromyalgia when they don't know what it is. I also think fibromyalgia is real. See what I'm saying? So I think it all kind of gets lumped together, kind of like IBS. There's not really a test for it. They just say, oh, you have these symptoms, you have IBS, but it can be a plethora of things, right? That are actually causing it. If you haven't tried LDN, that's the first route. If it is from autoimmune, low dose naltrexone, which you have to get a prescription for or order it from All Day Chemist in India, which I trust that place. You have to try it that way and see if calming your immune system down using microscopic amounts of this helps. Then you know that it was likely like true fibromyalgia. But I've also seen a lot of people get misdiagnosed with it when they have a B12 deficiency. I actually came across people talking about phytic acid and inositol, like severe deficiencies of that causing like the pain all over the body, and so that's something to look into. And then also like consider working deeply on your gut health, especially with like homemade water kefir, milk kefir, homemade ferments and things like that. The stuff from the store is typically pretty fake, so it won't be as impactful, you know, and just kind of like, I don't know, same thing with the headaches. If you look at all the theories of what causes fibromyalgia and then kind of go down the list of like where you would think that does and doesn't apply for you, you'll probably land on something, you know, but also get your house checked for mold. That's a big one, you know, and consider getting a genetic panel done as well, because it might be something crazy. Like, for example, so I have primary carnitine wasting mutation. Not a lot of people have it. It's not likely what you're dealing with, but part of that is like my muscles burn a lot, and I'm very, very tired and fatigued all the time. And then if I do anything, my muscles hurt even more, and I could have easily been told that I had fibromyalgia, but it turns out I had no fucking carnitine in my body. And I'm working through it. It's why I have histamine issues and things like that. It just takes time. It's taking time. I didn't know for 39 years. I didn't know that I was slowly dying and my muscles were slowly dying, because I couldn't use fat for energy. And so it's going to take me a while to recover. But, you know, and so I'm just saying that like genetics are like really powerful here, because if you get a look at what's happening inside of you on a genetic personal level, you might be like, oh shit, I actually have this, or I have this, or this could help. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let me scroll down. I'm going to find one more, and I'm going to jump off because I see it's been 40 minutes. Yeah, okay, I'm going to jump into this one. It's a loaded question, but we're gonna do it. Question: since colloidal silver is considered a heavy metal, should we not take it or use it daily? The non-toxic community is making a big deal out about this, and I use it a lot for everything. Please don't kill your liver. It is a heavy metal. I'm not saying that there's no time and place for it, but like they really try to hide how often, like on a regular basis, people really hurt themselves with colloidal silver. And it's a lot like the essential oil industry, where they'll say, well, you weren't making it right or you weren't taking it right, versus understanding that this has a real risk and it can have real harmful impact on our body when we ingest these. I personally would never ingest colloidal silver, right? I would use it topically, sure. But, you know, they kind of come across the theory of like, oh, well, back in the day, they used to put silver coins in drinks to, you know, and I'm not saying, again, if there was like a highly specific reason that you were using it, you better be sure that your liver is on point. You better make sure that your detox pathways aren't compromised. And that could be from something that's going on with your health and or genetics, by the way. You better make sure that you are doing things to help your body remove excess metals from your body, and that you're shitting at least twice a day. Right, because if not, it starts to build up. And so it's not like it hurts you right off the bat, but it builds and it builds and it builds. People turn themselves blue. People kill their livers. People hurt their kidneys. People have brain damage from using colloidal silver internally. And I know it's a really hotbed topic, but people are like, well, I like to take it for my immune system. I'm like, just take some elderberry, right? There are so many things. So whatever you are using colloidal silver from, and you're not like dying from the plague, even then I would probably use pokeroot over colloidal silver for the plague. But like, consider asking yourself, what am I using this for? And is there a safer alternative herb or food or a lifestyle change that I could use to potentially not kill myself with? Right. And again, I know people are going to come at me and talk about how amazing it is and how you have to do it right and how it's saved them. And again, I'm not saying there's never any application, but I'm saying 99% of the time there's a safer way to go about that application with something different. Right. For wound healing, sure. You know, but internally, I wouldn't do that. So it's been about 42 minutes. I am going to jump off, folks. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to, you know, continue supporting, my ability to like let my brain leak and come on here with really red cheeks and just do a fucking Q&A live like this and be like, all right, let's see what we can do. Or, you know, to help me keep a roof over my head, tea in my pot, consider becoming a member. It's literally less than $1 a month to join. It just supports my capacity to exist as a human and to teach freely. You do get early access to videos as I'm able to upload them. Right now, I've got one on there about like herbs for weight loss and understanding your AMPK pathway and how to turn that on and what that is. But also, you get a Sunday Q&A for members only. So if I missed your question here and you become a member on YouTube, you will have access to that Q&A where I'm far more likely to get to your question because I don't have as many scrolling by my screen. And you can also check out my apothecary. I make something for everybody. I've got books, herbal capsules, mouth mud, all kinds of stuff. So definitely check it out. And if you can't do any of that, or even if you can, the most important thing is to make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. Sharing is super important because it helps other people realize that they can take their health back into their hands. They're smart enough to do this. It tells the algorithm that I'm a pretty cool person and they should show me to other people. So thank you so much for watching, folks, and I'll see you next time. Bye.